today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Per a post from Marvnation's Instagram account,
La Nación del Boxeo, Marvnation, le da la bienvenida a campeona argentina de 2 divisiones, Yesica La Tuti Bopp. En Marvnation seguimos apoyando el boxeo de mujeres y Yesica alcanza otro campeonato mundial.
it appears that just as one of Marvnation's other fighters has become a free agent, Adelaida Ruiz, who we talked about in my previous video, they've brought yet another fighter into the fray. A more experienced fighter, a former 2-division champion in Yesica Bopp. Once one of the most dominant fighters, one of the most dominant forces anywhere at or around light flyweight, sporting a professional record of 37 wins with 3 losses, 17 knockouts, 23 successful title defenses as a champion, having held the WBA and WBO titles at light flyweight and the WBO title at flyweight. Decorated fighter, one of the best the sport has seen in recent years, though it's not without a caveat. Yesica Bopp is 39 years old. First indications that perhaps Father Time was finally starting to catch up to the Argentinian champion was about 2 years ago in September of 2021 when she lost a split decision to Juliana Basualdo, fighting well above her weight. The Basualdo fight was up there at super flyweight, where Yesica normally campaigned 2 divisions south at light flyweight. Suffered that upset loss and rebounded off that loss that same year opposite the ring, then unbeaten Johanna Zuniga with a 4th-round TKO stoppage, just to end up losing her title, losing her very next fight to Mexico's own Yesica Plata. We haven't seen her since then. This is an interesting signing for Marvnation, who I reiterate seems to have split ways. Adelaida Ruiz, she's not with them anymore, but now Yesica is. Yesica is some years older than Adelaida Ruiz. Seems that she wants to give it one last go round, one last title run at 39 years old. Serious questions as to who she can win a title from. Will she continue to campaign at light flyweight or move up to flyweight, where Marlen Esparza reigns as that division's unified champion? There are 2 champions at flyweight, just 2. Marlen Esparza is one, Arely Musinho is the other. Arely Musinho, who is currently under orders by way of the IBF to satisfy her mandatory challenger, Gabriela Fundoria. She's not at liberty to fight Yesica Bopp. Marlen Esparza might be. The question is, does Marlen Esparza want to? What's in it for Marlen? Depends. Is Yesica Bopp after her? Where will Yesica Bopp be campaigning moving forward? It's been a year since she last fought. Will she campaign as a light flyweight, a flyweight, perhaps a super flyweight? There are 4 champions at super flyweight, some more vulnerable, some more beatable than others. Safe to say that every single one of the 4 champions at super flyweight is in fact a less experienced fighter than Yesica Bopp is here today. Argentina's own Maciela Lujan holding the IBF, Mexico's own Ashley Gonzalez holding the WBC, Mizuki Hiruta holding the WBO, and Clara Lescarat holding the WBA. I think that Yesica has a better chance of getting one of these champions in the ring than, say, Marlen Esparza. Marlen, down there at flyweight, at super flyweight, the title opportunities are more abundant. They're not without a caveat. Yesica Bopp, being 39 years old and fighting fights the way that she fights in previous years, a very athletic and bouncy fighter, strong puncher. Very strong. One of the strongest anywhere at or around these weights. Mid-range to inside fighter, mid-range to inside puncher. She's got a young woman's style, and at 39 years old, that's a problem. Could be. Could give her reasonable odds against any one of the 4 champions, any one of the 4 fighters at super flyweight, but she ain't getting any younger. None of us are. Nobody is. Having not fought in the last 12 months, for a 39-year-old aging fighter and former champion, time really is of the essence. I've no doubts that Marvnation can get her a rebound fight, get her 1 or 2 keep busy fights, but they've got to get a move on. They have to hit the ground running with what time remains this year. August is fast approaching, and time is of the essence. I think there is still enough time to get Yesica at least 1 or 2 tick-over fights, 1 or 2 keep busy fights with what time remains this year, to allow her to regain her sharpness and build some momentum ahead of what could be a world title shot, where I anticipate would be either at flyweight or super flyweight. See what happens. Men's lightweight news. Former unified champion George Cambosos' comments on his controversial win this past Saturday over Maxie Hughes was the away fighter. A close fight is not a robbery.
No.
Listen, it was a close, gritty victory against the top 10 lightweight and IBO world champion in my return fight. Went straight into a tough test instead of taking a stiff. Do yourself a favor and mute that biased commentary and rewatch the fight. And then tell me exactly what you think, as many people have gone back, done that, and seen the decision was fair and correct. Yes, 117-111 was too far off for a scorecard, but I don't control the judges' view and the effective aggression they are seeing, but an 8-4 to 7-5 decision our way was right. With that being said, though full respect to Maxie Hughes, we knew he would come to fight and we knew how dangerous he was, a true top 10 lightweight. We give him the utmost respect, and it was an honor to share the ring with another warrior and family man like myself. It was good to be back inside the ring after some time away, win another title, and put myself in a position for the IBF lightweight world title. It was announced ahead of the match during the broadcast that Kambosos versus Hughes was an IBF final eliminator.
I thought I was hearing things.
I want to say that I had Maxie Hughes winning the fight. By and large, I had Maxie Hughes well ahead of George Kambosos. Though being a boxing fan, as cynical as I am, having watched the sport for so long, I didn't figure Maxie could or would win a decision, even though I had him well ahead. And it's because George is the house fighter. He very recently inked a pact with Top Rank. I believe it's their intention to put him in the ring with one of their other fighters, Shakur Stevenson.
And they're going to do that. By hook or by crook, they're going to make sure that happens. They did. 117-111.
I want you to understand that I myself only saw about 3 rounds that I could give George.
3 or 4.
You say 5 the max. That still means Maxie Hughes wins 7-5. 7 rounds to 5.
David Sutherland scored the fight a draw.
Gerard Ritter scored at 115-113 for George Kambosos.
But it's the Joseph Mason card that had everyone scratching their heads. I mean, 117-111. The other 2 judges seem to have the fight much closer than he did. And this isn't by accident. This is by design.
Because how could he have had it that wide? How could his card differ so much from the other 2 judges' scorecards? This wasn't incompetence. It was corruption. Plain old corruption.
It was.
And
There's a lot of buzzwords in the sport of boxing, a lot of overused buzzwords and catchphrases, like when you hear somebody say that close fights aren't robberies.
Yeah, that's contingent upon this actually being a close fight. I don't think it was. Looked like an 8-4 to 7-5 fight in favor of Maxie Hughes for me.
Maxie Hughes, the pure boxer. Maxie Hughes, the southpaw, whose movement
and counterpunching gave George Kambosos a lot of problems. He didn't have the feet for this assignment. Almost immediately, you noticed that George was very much struggling to get off his punches, get off his shots, shooting a single jab
instead of a double or a triple,
shooting a single to set up the backhand and missing.
Unable to keep up with and keep on Maxie Hughes, put the pressure on him. George is not a pressure fighter.
And the most eye-catching punches, the memorable ones, were coming from Maxie Hughes. A very meaty body shot that he landed, a couple of backhands.
All the eye-catching punches for me and my money were coming from Maxie Hughes.
Not a slave to the moment. I'm not proposing that we throw the whole fighter away, but being honest with you, George didn't win that fight. George lost that fight, and he's very lucky.
117-111.
For me, it wasn't close enough to where you could say that George won it by the skin of his teeth. No, George didn't win that fight. Top Rank just ensured that he got the decision because they've got plans. The old saying goes, fighters fight for today, but judges judge for tomorrow.
Bad style matchup for George. A pure boxer.
You know what was working for George in the Teofimo Lopez fight, which is a signature fight, it's the best we've ever seen him, is that George was setting up counters. He was hanging back, letting Teofimo come to him.
Teofimo stepped out of character.
Looked to me like Teofimo was trying to go for an early knockout. He wanted to go home early, and in doing so, he sacrificed defense for offense, opening himself up to counter punches from George Kambosos, who was just hanging back and picking him off.
Lopez isn't normally that front foot heavy.
George didn't have to go out there and find Lopez, whereas with Maxie Hughes, that was the assignment.
He had to give chase.
Where he was able to play the defender with Teofimo Lopez, he had to be more of an aggressor with Maxie Hughes, who wouldn't stand in one spot. He's not a flat-footed fighter. Movement
gave George trouble.
George, not being an according to Hoyle pressure fighter, not being a volume puncher, he was missing a lot of the ingredients he needed to give Maxie Hughes a problem. And I don't think George really won this fight. He didn't deserve this decision, but he still got it. It's not the first robbery, and it won't be the last. The idea that this fight was so close, so tooth to nail, so al dente.
This ain't fettuccine. This is a plain old robbery. That's what it was.
Get the same guys regurgitating the same old tired tropes that close fights aren't robberies. Well, I don't think this was a close fight. Let's start there.
I don't think it was close, and I don't think it's a coincidence that George, at least in this instance, was a house fighter, or that one of the judges had this fight.
There's always one judge in the pocket. At least one. How many times have you heard me say that? Devin Haney's win over George Kambosos is not aging well, nor is Teofimo's loss. His loss to George. This is intended to be one of Devin Haney's more solid victories, one of the more solid names on his resume, and I can't say that that victory is aging better with time. Aging well? No, it isn't. This guy was a champion. Maxie Hughes got robbed on Saturday. Not the first robbery I've seen. Won't be the last. Finally, in men's welterweight news ahead of this upcoming weekend's mega match, Spence on Crawford showdown. This is one of those legendary fights. It had to happen. Would have been a black eye for the sport if it didn't. He's my dancing partner, and I'm his dancing partner, said Spence on the Pivot podcast. We are meant for each other. What is being described in some circles as this era's Leonard versus Hearns. De La Hoya versus Trinidad. These two fighters are some years older than those fighters were when they met. You consider that by age 25, Sugar Ray Leonard had already fought both Roberto Duran and Tommy Hearns, Oscar De La Hoya and Felix Trinidad. They were only 26 when they fought. These two guys, they're in their mid-30s. Took them long enough. This is one of those legendary fights. This is like Sugar Ray not fighting Tommy Hearns, or Tommy Hearns not fighting Marvin Hagler. It had to happen. The hope now is that the last 5 years was not time spent, time squandered, that the last 5 years have helped to build this fight into a big commercial fight, so it can be a big commercial success. The jury is still out. I don't know what this is going to bring in at the box office. 500,000? A million? Over a million? I don't know. Crawford says the Spence fight is one that boxing needed to have. I think the PBC needed it as well. More specifically, I think the PBC needed a big year. They needed a big year this year, and now they're having it. All the success they've had with the Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis fight, the success they're going to have with Canelo versus Charlo, and this fight, whatever it brings in, it will be a part of the PBC's biggest calendar year to date. It's going to be great for boxing. It's going to be great for the fans, Crawford told BoxingScene.com and other reporters. This was the fight that I wanted. This was the fight that boxing needed. Two fighters putting everything on the line, both in their primes and no blemishes on their records, and letting it all go in one night. What made the fight get over the hump? I just let him know what's up. Let's fight and get it done. Let's stop playing around and faulting everybody. Can't blame game and do the fight. I went to him man to man and told him, let's come together and let's make this fight happen. The terms of engagement for this fight are somewhat different than they were late last year. Late last year, it was reported and confirmed that neither fighter stood to make any guaranteed cash from the show. They were both going to get paid from the net. Just the net. Now, early reports seem to indicate that both fighters stand to make sizable guarantees, so I think that helped. This is it. This is the moment we've both been waiting for, said Crawford. I want to make a statement by beating Errol Spence in tremendous fashion and leaving no doubt who was the victor. There is no pressure. I have been in this situation many times before. I just have to go out there and do what I know I want to do, and do what I have been doing all my life. You'd never know it, but Terrence Crawford has far more world title fights, far more world title experience under the hot lights than Errol does. Most of Errol's fans relegate Crawford's body of work to just his welterweight resume, as if the other stuff doesn't count. Terrence does in fact have more world title fights at more weights than Errol. Errol Spence, who anticipates an aggressive Crawford. I see him coming out a bit more assertive. He thinks Crawford's going to try to get off to a fast start. That would be a break in character for Terrence Crawford. Usually takes him a few rounds to get into a groove. Feel like Errol Spence is likelier to get off to a fast start, or try to, than Terrence. In any event, Spence said, I see him coming out probably a bit more assertive than he usually is, Spence told FightHype.com. Spence is the more aggressive guy. Spence is the volume puncher. For me and my money, it seems likelier than not that if anybody's going to try to hit the gas, it would likelier be Errol than Terrence, if
history is any indicator of things to come. That is what has worked for Errol Spence Jr. in the past. His mid-range to inside body attack, his volume punching, beating his opponents into submission. Strange that he thinks it will be Terrence that will have a break in character.
Anything's possible, but not everything is probable.
There's a feeling that Terrence can't win a decision, that even though this is a PBC show, Terrence, not being a PBC fighter, he can't let it get to the scorecards. I know everybody's saying it, and he's hearing it, his coach is hearing it, so they are going to try and change things up and do things differently. I see him coming out a little faster.
He raises a valid point.
Though based on the styles, what I see is Terrence just has to hang back. Let Errol do what he normally does, and he can pick him off. He can take him out.
It's been my prediction for the last 5 years.
Terrence Crawford, by way of knockout. Terrence Crawford, who says, I've been the underdog my whole career. Even if he's not actually the underdog going into this thing, he's actually the betting favorite. Terrence says, I've been the underdog my whole career. Coming into this fight, I feel as if a lot of people are writing me off. Crawford told Sean Porter, his former opponent and good friend on the Porter Way podcast, saying, well, Errol's bigger, Errol's stronger, he's more technical, his jab is better, he's better defensively, he could take a punch better. I'm just sitting here and licking my chops because I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of.
Terrence has been the wide favorite in most of his fights. I think if he's referring to himself as an underdog, he has to mean it figuratively because he has been marginalized for the last 5 years.
No, he's not the underdog going into this fight, and he's not the underdog in most of the fights that he goes into, but his accolades are often unappreciated and undermined.
I remember immediately after the Spence versus Porter fight, there was a demand from the Spence fans that Terrence Crawford take on that Sean Porter. Guys saying that Sean would be too strong, too aggressive for Crawford, just so that when Crawford fights him and knocks him out, they don't give him any credit.
I feel like that's what Crawford is talking about. That's what he's referring to.
Beating Spence would be the cherry on top.
Nolo's guys saying that Spence is better in every area, every department, better than Terrence Crawford. They will have little excuses to make if it goes the other way.
No excuses.
I do have Terrence Crawford winning that fight by way of knockout for the aforementioned reasons, because he can't let it get to the judges' scorecards. I don't think he's going to.